I'd like to open tonight's meeting of the Community and Cultural Committee at 6 o'clock. First, I'd like to advise that this committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during this course of this committee meeting, and audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I have received none. Apologies, I have received none. We have the absence of Councillor Stutchbury. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee recommends to Council that the minutes of the Community and Cultural Committee meeting held on Monday 20th of March be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to open debate on that item?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There being no speakers for or against, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Matters arising from the minutes, I have none. Reports and minutes of committees and working parties, I have none. Item 7.1, the Draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation as printed, endorse the Draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan, DIAP, and place the Draft Disability Inclusion Action Plan, DIAP, on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Happy to second the motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, would you like to open debate on that item?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, I'd just like to say that in relation to this item, I had the privilege of speaking at the launch of the disability. What is that? I forgot.
The Ideas Forum.
NDIS. I had it in my head and it's gone again. But anyway, so the NDIS on Friday night, and it was raised at the NDIS by myself that we have this particular strategy coming to council. But I did notice in the attachment that bus shelters are deemed to be ineffective or ineffectual for people with wheelchairs, but I also didn't see much in relation to public transport, and it was raised at that forum by myself that it's something we as a region and certainly across Australia need to address, because I think public transport in general for people without disabilities is inadequate, but in terms of the people with disabilities, it's further exacerbated as they have to get to and from appointments, and certainly our ageing population, as mentioned in the report, also need to be catered for. And I think it's something we as a council can certainly take a lead on and certainly encourage our state and federal members to step up and do something about this national disgrace, which is called lack of public transport in regional Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I have a question from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that the author of the document, Elizabeth Sayers, is in the gallery this evening. I'd like to congratulate you on the document and the content. I have a couple of questions I'll direct, obviously, to Mr. Jenkins in this particular case. I looked in detail in relation to the survey itself, and I'm interested in two aspects of the survey. One detailed and asked those that were 105 and over years of age to contribute to the survey. And also I noticed council staff, anyone aged 85 and over was also able to contribute to the survey. I'm interested first off, were there any contributors in those age brackets? First off, Mr. Jenkins.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, there wasn't. The age groups are included in the survey in that fashion because they align with the census figures that come out, and it allows us to compare our figures to the census figures. We did actually have someone that was between 90 and 94 contribute to the survey, and amongst the staff we did have someone contribute who was between the ages of 65 and 69. But as we are becoming an ageing community, we're probably expecting to have more people in those age brackets as we move forward.
If I may, Madam Chair, the second part of my questions would be in relation to vision impaired. I thought there was a little bit lacking in relation to vision impaired in the document itself, because the councillors on the previous council remember that about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, we made sure that there was provision for the vision impaired to freely walk down our major streets in the CBD without being impaired by A-frames and chairs and etc. So I just like to make sure that we actually are making sure the vision impaired get equal opportunity, not only to council facilities and buildings, but also to our CBDs. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, there was people with vision impairment that were surveyed as part of this consultation process. And our council's access committee has actually got 3 members at least that have vision impairment and have already had input into the street activities policy, which is coming up for review, and had a presentation from council staff in relation to that matter. So there has been quite a bit of input into the Disability Inclusion Action Plan from vision impaired people. And I think there is one item that relates to the ongoing street activities policy review.
Thank you, Mr Jenkins. Councillor Doxey, any further questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that was very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have another question from Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's relation to an item in the budget. I was just checking with Mr Ferris and Mr Keys. I think there's some plans in the budget for some parking trials, electronic parking, trials as far as timed parking is concerned. I think I made some submissions around the fact that we should actually trial it on the disability parking spaces first, because my wife has now had the occasion to be taking my mother-in-law around town, and she noticed that at every second time she tries to pull into a disability parking spot, it's been taken by somebody that hasn't got a sticker. So I'm just flagging that as something in our community that a lot of people are concerned about. But as far as this report's concerned, it's excellent, and the feedback from various parts of the community has been fantastic. Thank you.
So, question from Mr Jenkins.
Well, basically about running the trial of that when we do it on disability car parking spaces.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not particularly aware of where that disability trial on parking spaces is going, but perhaps Mr Keys might be able to illuminate you, as it's one of his budget items, I think.
Mr Keys.
Through you, Madam Chair, the trial is about sensors that operate to detect the time spent or vehicle spends in a restricted time parking zone. So on that basis, it probably may not be appropriate for the disabled parking areas because they're not timed. Yep. However, we do have additional staff that have now joined us. We've been very fortunate to attract a couple of fantastic rangers to our team in recent weeks, and the parking patrols will be increased, and I will make a point of ensuring that the disabled spots are able to be patrolled. They do involve a very detailed check of the vehicle to make sure that the disability parking permits haven't slipped off, haven't fallen on the floor, and are properly displayed, and that they are current. So a sensor, unfortunately, wouldn't be able to address that, but we'll certainly take up that cause and make sure that we do have access available for as many people as possible.
Thank you, Mr Keys.
That's fine, thank you.
I've got another question from Councillor King.
Madam Chair, through the member of staff, probably Mr Ferris, does the footpaths in Dean Street have the braille type pavers in there that will keep people away from the A-frames and that if they had a disability, sight impairment?
You, Madam Chair. Certainly at the intersections there's the guides for the visually impaired, and at our pedestrian crossings, but not against the walls of the buildings longitudinally along those. But as discussed earlier, we've made some changes to our policy last year in recent times to clear that area to enable easier access for visually impaired people.
Thank you, Mr Ferris.
Just
follow-up question?
Yeah, follow-up question. So I'm right in those raised braille things. That's what they're there for, to keep people in track with their cane and little ball and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr Ferris. I have another question from Councillor Stutchbury.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the topic of disability parking, I was subjected to council interviews a couple of Saturdays ago, and one of the residents queried me on disability parking at the airport. And so this question is, it's more of asking Mr. Ferris to clarify this for all of us in case any others get asked. There is a slight conflict between RMS guidelines and council guidelines on disability parking, in that the RMS state that parking for disability ticket holders is essentially for free, even at metered parks. But at the airport, when someone parks in the disabled car park, when they exit the airport, they have to pay for a ticket to exit. And I am given to understand that the airport car parking is private, and that all private car parking is similar. So if Mr. Ferris could just confirm that for me and us, and perhaps clarify it with a few comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Mr. Ferris?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, as Councillor Stutchbury has outlined, the regulations relating to free parking for in disabled parks is primarily for on-street public car parking. So where there's street meters or a ticketing or a coupon type arrangement on the streets, or in open access public car parks, if you like. Where you move to paid car parking in a precinct, albeit somewhere like the airport, there is a free period. There is a fee, an incremental fee, as those customers stay for extended periods of time. So the focus at the Albury Airport has been about the access and having those disabled spots close to the terminal, and having the appropriate ramps, etc., for easy access in and out. However, if the stay's extended while they're on business or on holidays, etc., then the standard fees will apply. If they're only there to meet and greet, then the standard rules of less than 30 minutes, it'll be free of charge.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Any further questions, Councillor Stutchbury? All right, I have no further questions, no further speakers for or against. Councillor Mack, would you like to close debate on that item?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. I have no officers' reports for noting, no delegates' reports for noting, no notices of urgent business, councillors, and no confidential matters. So I'll close the meeting at 6:13.
Thank you, and thank you. Thank you. I declare open the Finance and Administration Committee meeting for this evening, and advise that this council meeting is being webcast. This committee meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the committee meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this committee meeting, that you're respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this committee meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations, I have none. There are none. Apologies, there are none. FAC 4, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to move those minutes from Monday the 20th of March, that they be, where are we, be adopted. Thank you.
And Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to the motion? I have no questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? The motion is carried. Are there any matters arising for the minutes? I see no indication on the board. Officers' reports for consideration. FAC 7.1, the draft code of meeting practice. Councillor Mack.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move that committee recommends to Council that Council A, adopt the draft Code of Meeting Practice for Councillors, staff and delegates as attached. B, include the Albury City Code of Meeting Practice for Councillors, staff and delegates in the Public Policy Register. And C, place the document on the Albury City website. Thank you.
And Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to second that motion.
Councillor Mack, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No.
I have no other questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? The motion is carried. FAC 8, Officers' Reports for Noting. FAC 8.1, Investment Balances. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to move that recommendation as a motion, and I would also then like to ask a question.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stutchbury.
Yes, happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Glacken, you have a question?
Yes, if I may. I'm aware that there was an item in the federal budget, through you to the most relevant member of staff. There was an area in the federal budget that was about big banks and taxing the 4 big banks, plus I think they added later another bank to that. Can I ask if we can at some stage be briefed on that, the implication of that to our investment and therefore possible future investment policy guidelines? And I can only assume that we would have that discussion after perhaps receiving some direction or suggestion from perhaps some organisations such as the Local Government Association. So can I just ask that that be considered and we be briefed accordingly?
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, as indicated, there is a proposed tax on the larger banks as part of the federal budget. How that would impact the banks and how they'll respond is not yet known, and any potential implications for Council's investment policy can be considered as part of any future reviews.
Councillor Glacken, you happy with that?
Yes, that's. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's ultimately what may happen. Can I ask, has Council been given any indication by the lead authorities as to when we might be looking at that? No, nothing yet. Okay, I'm happy with that answer.
Yeah, the budget still needs to be adopted through the upper house, so that's potentially a long way off.
Thank you, Mr Zaknich. Question from Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the profile of Council's investments on page 14 of the electronic copy, the first 2 items, the T Corp has 5 million at call, at 2.04, and 5 million with the CBA at 1.45. That's a massive discrepancy. And just wondering, obviously, there's got to be a reason for that, but is it necessary for us to have 10 million on at call? And secondly, why the large discrepancy between the two?
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, $10 million in at-call deposits is larger than normal. In particular, the Commonwealth Bank at-call account was higher due to an investment or term deposit that matured. And however, we did not roll that investment off over with the same institution, as they weren't offering a competitive rate. But those funds were subsequently invested with another institution. And in terms of the discrepancy between the at-call account rates, clearly the T Corp option offers a more attractive return, and that's ordinarily used for surplus funds that are required in the short term to pay suppliers and employees. The Commonwealth at-call account is more used as an operational account for funds that are transferred from our operating bank account to at-call, and anything in excess of $1 million normally would be transferred to the T Corp account. I hope that answers the question, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Vanavan,
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair, through you. You said initially that the CBA one was because there was a term deposit that matured, and it was just left in there as an at call because they weren't providing a competitive rate. So basically, what I'm asking now is, so how long was that amount on at call? Like how many days? I'm assuming it was only a number of days because it just happened to fall at the end of this 30th of April.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The funds were returned to the council from the initial term deposit, I think, on a Friday, and then were subsequently reinvested with another institution on the Monday, from recollection.
1st of May, yeah. Thank you.
I have no other questions, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 8.2, Corporate Health Indicators Report. Do I have a mover, councillors? Suddenly everywhere. Councillor Glacken, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion, and I have a question as well.
And a seconder, Councillor Stutchbury.
Very happy to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Glacken, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, it's with regards to employee costs. I noticed on the graphs that there is an indication there, but I haven't got the actual figures. So I just wanted to confirm that the total cost with reference to full-time employee payroll costs, they were down, but the overtime budget was also up. So just confirming that whilst one is indicated as 5% less and the other at 2%, what proportion are those figures?
Mr. Finlayson.
Mr. Chair, in terms of the exact proportion, I'll take that on notice. However, I can confirm that the employee overtime costs are included within the overall employee costs. So although the overtime costs are slightly higher than the year-to-date budget, overall, including overtime, the employee cost budget is within budget.
Still down, yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. I'd like to make a comment myself, and it relates to the lost time injury frequency rate, which I note is now at the wonderful level of 2.5. And when I got on this council, I think I probably made myself a bit, well, I wasn't particularly liked by a number of staff when I challenged why we had a lost time injury frequency rate exceeding 10. I'd have to say that this is a brilliant result to get it down to 2.5, and it's continuing to drop. Not only is that reflected in our workers' compensation premiums, which have dropped dramatically, but it's also reflected in the fact that our staff go home healthy and well at the end of each day. 2.5 is good. I did and have said on numerous occasions that Norske Skog has a lost time injury frequency rate of 0, and I would love to see this council achieve that same result. So congratulations to all the staff who are responsible for this work to achieve that brilliant result. I have no other questions or comments, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. FAC 8.3, Delivery Program Quarterly Progress Report. And councillors, I need a mover, and I have one. Councillor Mack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to move the committee recommends to council that council receive and note the Delivery Program Quarterly Progress Report for March 2017. Thank you.
And Councillor Stutchbury.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Mack, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
I have no questions, so I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports for noting, no matters of urgent business and no confidential matters, so I declare the meeting closed at 6:25. Thank you.